Drop that dynamo that. Yeah. Start. And now we start off episode part 4 of the fixture reveal. We got the final 6 rounds to take a look at. First game, we got Adelaide, go to round 19 now. We got Adelaide versus Gold Coast at Adelaide Oval. Brisbane Lions versus Western Bulldogs at the Gabba. Carlton versus Melbourne at the MCG. Collingwood versus Fremantle at the MCG. Essendon versus GWS at Marvel. Jake Stringer versus his old side. Geelong versus St Kilda. This could be the last time we see Reece Stanley versus old side. Hawthorn versus the Power at UTAS Stadium. Catch those games at GMHBK. Swans versus North Melbourne. Luke Parker returns to the SCG. And we got West Coast versus Richmond at Optus. And we'll stay tuned for round 20. And we move on to round 20, which is a rivalry round. We start off with the MCG fixtures for this round. Hawthorn versus Carlton. Richmond versus Collingwood. Now we're at Marvel Stadium. Essendon versus Western Bulldogs. North Melbourne versus Geelong, which will be North Melbourne centenary game. St Kilda versus Melbourne. And we got the local derbies now. The Q Clash. Brisbane versus Gold Coast at People First Stadium, and that's Gold Coast's own derby. The Battle of the Bridge. GWS versus Sydney at Giant Stadium. The Showdown. Adelaide versus Port Adelaide. And Andrew Dillon has finally listened to my advice this year and put the Western Derby on that round 2. Fremantle versus West Coast at Optus Stadium. And stay tuned for round 21. Move on to round 21. We got Adelaide versus Hawthorn at Adelaide Oval. Collingwood versus Brisbane at the MCG. The rematch of the controversial Gabba round game last year, Fremantle and Carlton at Optus. Geelong versus Port Adelaide at GMHBA. Will the Cats win there this time? Gold Coast versus Richmond at People First Stadium. Daniel Rioli plays his first game at People First against his old team as a son. We've got Melbourne versus West Coast at Marvel Stadium. Melbourne's first home game at Marvel Stadium since 2016. About time. St Kilda versus North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. Sydney versus Essendon at the SCG. And Western Bulldogs versus GWS at Marvel Stadium. The final round after this. First up, we got the rematch of the grand final again. Brisbane and Sydney at the Gabba. Carlton versus Gold Coast at Marvel Stadium. Cats versus Essendon at GMHBA Stadium. GWS versus North Melbourne at Monaco Oval. Hawthorn versus Collingwood at the MCG. Melbourne versus the Western Bulldogs at the MCG. Port versus Freo at Adelaide Oval. Richmond versus St Kilda at the MCG. And the last matchup of the round, the Crows are going to Perth to meet the West Coast Eagles. And we'll see you soon for round 23. One more round to go after round 23. And here we are. What a ride it has been for this fixture reveal. We are up to the last round. We got Brisbane versus Hawthorn at the Gabba. Finally, Hawthorn are going to the Gabba. Collingwood versus Melbourne at the MCG. Essendon versus Carlton at the MCG. About time those two are versing each other twice again. Giants versus St Kilda at Engie Stadium. North Melbourne versus Adelaide at Marvel Stadium. It took till the last round and finally Jack Lukosius is set to meet his old side. Port Adelaide and the Gold Coast at Adelaide Oval. It's been a long time coming for Jack. Richmond versus Geelong at the MCG. West Coast and the Swans at Optus. And Bulldogs versus Fremantle at Marvel. And that is it. That is the end of the fixture review.